Good morning. Great to see all of you here. But of course, I can't see you, but I'm trusting that you're there, and it's great to have you joining us here on Sunday or whenever in the week that you're watching this. Now, today, I don't have the same story like I've done in weeks past in terms of a Bible story, but our scriptures today talk about Jesus being a shepherd. And so I brought one of my big sheep in. And what do you suppose a shepherd does? Well, that's right. A shepherd looks after the sheep. And this one, I don't really have to look after because, of course, he's a stuffed animal, so it doesn't really do much. He just kind of sits there. Occasionally I have to dust him, but other than that, I don't have to feed him or walk him or look after him. But what the Bible tells us is that God and Jesus are like a shepherd to us. And God looks after us and cares for us and walks with us through life. And this gospel lesson tells us that we can recognize Jesus' voice and we can trust Jesus. And that makes all the difference. And to help us remember that, I've got a silly story. And the silliest stories are always the true ones. So here we go. When I was a boy, probably not much older than you, my parents had some neighbors over and they were playing a card game called Bridge. And they brought their dog over with them, the neighbors did. And Candy was the dog's name, and we played with Candy, and it was great fun. But then it came time for us to go to bed, so we went to bed. And Candy didn't have anybody to play with, so Candy went and curled up somewhere and went to sleep. And the adults were all playing cards, and they were having a fun time, and then the time came for the neighbors to go home, and they went home. Well, a little while later, when my parents were locking up the house, they realized that Candy, the dog, had curled up in a corner and hadn't gone home with the neighbors. And so my mother said to the dog, "Candy, Lorna and Ernie have gone home, you need to go home." And what do you suppose the dog did? She didn't do anything, didn't move at all. So my mother went to the door, opened the door up and said, "Candy, you need to go home, go home." And what do you suppose the dog did? Dog didn't do anything. Well, they tried, they got a little treat that they knew that Candy would like, and they took it by the door, and Candy looked at them and wouldn't move. So finally, my parents had run out of ideas as to what to do to get Candy, the dog, to go home, so they called the neighbors and they said, "You forgot the dog here. The dog's still here." And they said, "Oh my gracious, we just assumed she was outside or that she'd gone to bed. Just send her home." And my parents said, "Well, we've tried. We told her to go home. We opened the door. We tried a treat. We can't think of anything else to do." And Ernie said to them, "Take the phone and put it next to the dog." My mother said, "Well, why would I do that?" He said, "Just trust me." So she took the phone and put it near the dog, and Ernie said in his loudest voice on the other end of the phone, "Candy, go home." And you know what the dog did? She got up, and she went out the door, and she went home. Now, that's a silly true story, but it reminds us that when we hear a voice that we trust, then we can act. And what our gospel does and what our scriptures today do is that they remind us that when we hear God speaking, we'll know it's God's voice and we can trust it and we can act because the Lord is our shepherd and wants us to lead us through life to the good things and the blessings and the hope which God has promised. Now, as always, there are some crafts below where you're watching this, thanks to Bronwyn and to May. There's also stuff from Illustrated Ministry, and I know if you're like us, there's lots of good coloring to do. And before we finish, I forgot to do, so I'll leave that as a message for you, okay? And why don't we join our hearts together in the Lord's Prayer. Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory, forever and ever. Amen. You take care and have a good week.